honor to introduce our speaker today, Matt Vogl. As a leader in public health, Matt has spent his entire career advocating for new approaches to address crises within our mental health system. His passion was the driving force behind his creation in 2015 of the National Mental Health Innovation Center at CU's Anschutz Medical Campus. As the executive director, Matt leads a team of professionals to bring radically new approaches to accelerate the responsible development of new technologies in order to better treat and prevent mental illness, promote mental wellness, and destroy stigma. Under Matt's leadership, the center developed a tech innovation network, a national clinical testbed to comprise organizations representing diverse sectors, including mental health practices, hospitals, schools, businesses, and many others. Through the network, tech developers can work with the center to ensure that their products are safe, effective, and built with the guidance of end users. Matt lectures extensively, and his work at the center has been highlighted in the media nationwide. He recently delivered a keynote address at the World Virtual Reality and Industry Summit in Nanjing, China, and was a distinguished lecturer at Guangxi University of Technology in South China, and delivered a TEDx talk on the use of virtual reality. Matt earned his BA from Marquette and a Master's of Public Health from the University of Minnesota. He now lives in beautiful Boulder, Colorado, with his wife and son, one of which is graduating this year from high school. Matt also has worked with the Stand Up Comic, and recently headlined or opened for Josh Wood. Although he doesn't work that frequently, he uses humor very effectively in his presentations. I suspect you'll hear some of that today. Please join me in welcoming Matt Vogl.
Thank you for the kind introduction and for destroying my credibility by mentioning the comedy part. I want to just thank the Denver Rotary Club and all of the Rotarians here today for having me, and mostly just for being willing to shine a light on an issue that makes a lot of people uncomfortable in mental health. So we're always just absolutely thrilled when people are willing to shine a light on the work that we do. So thank you for that. Steph mentioned my 17-year-old who is a senior, and this morning he said, what are you doing today? And I said, well, I have to go to Seattle this afternoon, but I'm also giving a talk for the Denver Rotary Club. And he stretched up his face and he said, there's a club about brakes? I said, no, not rotors, Rotary. And then he said, well, can I leave school and come? And I said, sure, of course you can come. And there's no cell phones allowed at the country club. He said, I'll go to school. So we got careful at having him here. I also have to mention that on the way over here, I accidentally spilled an entire Starbucks-sized coffee in my lap, so I slammed on brakes. And thankfully, because I'm traveling, I said, oh, good, I have an extra pair of pants in my bag, and unfortunately, they were jeans. So I apologize for the fashion faux pas. Hopefully, they don't kick me out until after I'm done. I want to talk today about mental health and the work that we're doing at the Mental Health Innovation Center, which I founded 4 years ago at the University of Colorado at the Anschutz campus. And to tell the story of why we needed this center, I want to use a case study and tell the story about me. This guy in the middle there, that's my Uncle Jim, and my two aunts, my mom's sisters, and my mom's brother. And growing up, I knew my mom's sisters, Aunt Kate and Aunt Mary, very, very well. They were at our house a lot. We went to their house outside of DC every summer, and we saw them at Christmas, and we used to call them, and they would send us cards, and so we knew them very, very well. And Uncle Jim was a mystery. Never saw him, never went to his house, not once. I don't have a single memory of him ever coming to our house. And people didn't really talk about him in the family. And found out, when I was about 6 years old, that, my parents from time to time would use the phrase manic depression when we talked about it, on the rare occasions that we talked about it. And I came to learn later that manic depression is another name for bipolar disorder. And I learned a lot about mental illness at a very early age from watching my family and how they treated Uncle Jim. Because my dad and my mom would say things when they talked about him on the rare occasions, like, oh, he's loony, he's a nutcase. He's off the rails. He's an alcoholic. He's a drunk. We never have him around because he's so embarrassing. And my dad's favorite phrase, he's batshit crazy. Apologies. And so I learned, at a very early age, that this is what you do with people who have mental illness. You keep them far away, you don't talk to them, you make fun of them, and you make sure that they're not going to come anywhere near your insulated world and your family. And I grew up thinking that that's what it was all about. So as I grew up and we moved to Colorado after grad school, this was my life. And on the surface, it looked great. My wife and I got married. We bought our first house in the Highlands. I started working at Comedy Works here in town. We had our beautiful son that was born, and I had a border collie that caught frisbees. How cool was that? Nothing better. And so on the surface, it looked like I had the perfect life, and there was nothing wrong at all. But it was all a charade, because underneath I had a very, very dark secret, as I was starting to deal with recurring depression that would come back every few months. And every time it came back, it got worse and worse and worse. It would last longer and longer, and it would get darker and darker. And I did a very, very good job of hiding it. I mean, I was a comedian, I had a border collie that caught frisbees. I was able to really project that, this was a great, happy life. And I didn't tell anybody about it. And I certainly didn't go seek help because I knew that I didn't want to be Uncle Jim. And I knew that would happen if I put myself as one of those people with mental illness. So I ignored it for a long time. And the thing is, with mental illness and with depression, you've had it, you understand this, that it gets worse and worse, and it's so gradual that you don't even notice yourself that it's getting worse. I always use the analogy that it's kind of like when the brakes are going on your car, and you don't know it until somebody else borrows your car, and say, what the hell, man, your car doesn't stop, your brakes are going. But you don't notice it because it's every day and it's gradual, and that's how depression is. And so slowly I started to think about suicide more and more and more. And that was the solution that I thought was the best one for me, because I was in so much pain. And eventually I started talking to friends and asking for help because these thoughts were scaring me. And I started hearing phrases like these. Just pick your chin off the bar and cheer up, look at all the things that you have to be happy about. You just be more positive. Your life is great. You need to man up. We say those things to people with mental illness. We say them and don't even think twice about it. What if we said all these things to someone who had cancer? Would that make any sense? If you said, oh, you got diagnosed with breast cancer, I'm really sorry, but you just got to cheer up and look at the bright side. You've got a great life. Oh, you have osteoporosis, well, man up. Diabetes, get your chin off the bar. We would never do it, and it sounds so laughable when we do this, and yet that's what we do to people with mental illness all the time. And so I was hearing that more and more from my friends, and all that does is make you feel worse about yourself, because you can't just man up. You can't just blow yourself out of it. It doesn't work that way. And so it just reinforces there's something fundamentally wrong with me. And so it got worse and worse and worse. My friend Harrison had the best one, and we joke about it now. But I confided in him and said, I'm starting to think about suicide more, and it's really scaring me because I can't control these thoughts. And he said, you know what you need to do? You gotta go camping. Go camping. Yes, you have cancer. Why don't you just go camping and get some fresh air? That's all you do. And yet that's what I was faced with. And all of it eventually got me to a place where I decided nobody cares. There's no solution. There's no way to end this pain except to take my own life. And that's the thing about suicide that a lot of people don't understand, is that the goal of suicide isn't death. The goal of suicide is pain relief. That people get in such pain, and it's so persistent and so awful, and you really come to believe this is the only way that I can ease my pain, to take my own life. Thankfully, a neighbor of mine had gone through some suicide prevention training, and she stopped me on the day that I was going to take my life. I had bought a gun and written a note, said goodbye to my infant son, and Lucille Leva, who was my neighbor, stopped me because she saw me crying as I was going into my house, and she was able to give me help. But I realized something awful when it happened, is that suicide and almost dying in my own hands wasn't rock bottom for me. That wasn't the worst part of all of this. The worst part came when I decided to get help, and I tried to access care in our mental health system. That's rock bottom. This is my metaphor for our mental health system. We've all been there, right? I-70 going up to the mountain. Maybe it's on in the winter on a powder day. Maybe it's in the summer on a beautiful Saturday. But we've all sat in that traffic, and that's exactly what's wrong with our mental health system. It's a simple case of supply and demand. We have more people that need care than we have providers to deliver that care. And so then we scramble, we wait until somebody's horribly, dangerously sick, and then we scramble and say, oh, we gotta find them care, but it doesn't exist. And so they wind up on incredibly long wait lists. And that's what I experienced. And the thing about wait lists that I always like to remind people about is that wait list, when you talk about mental health and mental illness, it's not a matter of convenience. This is Allie. I met Allie's mom about 6 years ago when I was at the Depression Center, and Allie was a 13-year-old girl lived in Douglas County, and she would actually ask her parents for help with her depression, and not many kids would do that, but Allie, really was exceptional and said, I need help. And so her parents made an appointment, but it was a 6-week wait list, and Allie took her own life after 4 weeks because she just couldn't hang on any longer. So make no mistake about it, when we talk about wait lists and mental health, we're talking about stuff that can kill people. So anyone who's ever tried to get access care in the mental health system knows that this is very often what you're looking at. You have things, and this is all what I found out, there's an inconsistent quality. I would call around and I couldn't get an appointment, and I found that the people that did have openings, very often there was a reason, because they weren't always the best, and that led to all sorts of other things like getting misdiagnosed, which happened to me 4 or 5 times before they had the right diagnosis. It leads to long wait lists. As I mentioned, challenges, if you have the wrong diagnosis, you're going to get on the wrong medication. If you're on the wrong medication, very often you're going to get worse instead of better, and it just becomes a spiral that you go down. Care is very, very uncoordinated. When I finally was getting good care, even then, I had a psychiatrist who was prescribing my medication. I had a therapist who was doing therapy for me, and I had my primary care doctor who was helping to oversee a lot of it. And none of them talked to each other, even though I had signed the releases. So the people that were all responsible for my health never ever spoke with each other once, as far as I knew. And then very high costs. When you have a supply and demand problem like we have in mental health, there's very, very little incentive for mental health providers to take insurance because it doesn't reimburse well and because it's an administrative hassle. So more and more every year we have providers, psychiatrists and therapists that say, I'm just going to be cash only. And that's what I faced. And even though I was working at the university, even though I knew psychiatrists, even though I knew people in the system and how the system worked, I still couldn't figure it out. I still couldn't get care. And I thought, what do people who don't have education do? What do people who don't have resources? What do people who aren't able to pay cash do? And that really scared the hell out of me. Eventually, I did get the right diagnosis. And my psychiatrist here in Denver said the words I was just dreading to hear, even though I was suspecting it. And she said, you have bipolar disorder. She said, you have bipolar disorder. In that moment, it would have been easier for me to hear you have pancreatic cancer. And I'm not kidding. At that moment, it was so awful because who did I think of? I thought of Uncle Jim. And I didn't hear bipolar disorder. What I heard was, you're batshit crazy. And now I was going to be that guy. I was going to be that dad that people avoided. I was going to be the dad that embarrassed my kids and had to sit at the bleachers at the end, at the end of the bleachers at his baseball game because nobody else wanted to be around me, and I was just convinced this is what the rest of my life was going to be like. Now, thankfully, my therapist was great, and she helped me understand that I was in pretty good company. There's people like Ben Stiller and Ted Turner, Robert Munch. We've got Iron Man on there. That I was in pretty good company, except for Britney Spears, but everybody else. I got to get her off of that slide. But it took a long time for me to get over my own stigmas related to mental health because it had been bred over so many years growing up when my parents would talk about Uncle Jim. But I realized at the end of it, there's got to be a better way because I'm not the only patient that experiences this. When you look at mental health care in our country, we're basically doing things the way we have for the last 7 years, where the office looks pretty much like it did with the same chair and the same ficus tree. Now maybe the clock is digital now instead of analog, but by and large, we're delivering mental health care the same way that we always have. We've been slower than the rest of medicine to bring new thinking into the field. And because I've been working on campus at the medical center, I saw this day after day, and I would see other disciplines embracing new technologies and new approaches, embracing prevention, and mental health really frozen in time. So with the support from the Anschutz Foundation, I was able to start the National Mental Health Innovation Center. I'm going to skip through a few of these slides so I can get to talking about technology. We're short on time. But the idea with the mental health center was we wanted to bring, in a very general way, bring new thinking into the field. So let's take some risks. There's so many people in the community that have great ideas. Let's take a different approach from what universities typically do, which is where we say, oh, I know what your problem is, and we have a grant that we can use to study that, and I'll get some papers written out of it and advance my career. We said, no, we need to take a different approach. We need to listen and listen to what communities need. We need to listen to the ideas that they have. Because very often the solutions are already out there. People say, I've been wanting to try this for years, but we just have to listen and do that. We have to figure out ways to get everybody involved. We're never going to solve these if we leave mental health just up to therapists and psychiatrists, because there's not enough. And everybody's affected by it. I have zipped over the slide of the Lead School of Business up in Boulder. When we started the center, we looked at we said U.S. businesses get hit about $100 billion a year, some estimates, far north of that, for untreated or undertreated mental health and addiction problems. There's employees, there's turnover, or there's absenteeism, presenteeism, reduced productivity, $100 billion a year. And so surely schools of business must be talking about this if it's such a huge issue. And we did a survey of the top 25 MBA programs in the country we were looking at. Wharton, Kellogg, all the top programs, and we did not find a single one that was giving any real attention to the issue of mental illness and how it impacts business. There were some that did, mindfulness and meditation for executives, but that was it. So we approached the Lead School and we said, look, everybody has a role to play in this. And instead of going business to business and doing lunch and learns, let's go right to the factory where we're making the future CEOs so that they graduate and enter the workforce with an understanding of the impact of mental illness in their workplace and addiction and what they can do about it, how they can create stigma-free work environments, how they can create benefit programs that encourage people to access care rather than discourage them. So we do that. But the biggest area that we're working in, and I want to spend the rest of the time talking about, is technology. And as I mentioned, mental health has been very, very slow to adopt new technology and new ideas, even though there's a lot that we can do with technology. Now, it's really easy to vilify. Anytime that there's a mass shooting or something, we immediately go to video games, or it's all the time on their phone. And yes, there are a lot of problems and challenges with technology, but there's also an opportunity to solve a lot of long-standing problems. It's not going to solve anything, but it can solve a lot of things. The guy who first opened my eyes to all of this was this guy, Jay Bucky. Jay is an astronaut, flew on Columbia 2 times, and he's now a physician and a professor at Dartmouth. And I met Jay shortly after we opened the center. And Jay had a small contract from NASA at the time. And they approached him and said, look, we need your help. If we're going to send people to Mars, we have to address the issue of psychological stress and extended spaceflight. Think about it. If we're going to send people to Mars in a small capsule for months and months and months at a time, there's some things that no matter how well you screen them are going to happen. They're going to fight. They are, anybody who's been on a road trip with their kids knows these things are true. They're going to fight. They are going to get depressed and they're going to get scared and anxious. Now, what do? If we don't deal with those problems, the whole mission will fall apart. You can't send a psychologist. You can't do anything therapeutic from Earth when there's a 20-minute delay from when I ask you a question to when the answer comes back. That's not very efficient therapy. So what do? Well, Jay and his team got to work, and on a shoestring budget, they said the only solution here is a technological approach. So they built what they call a virtual therapist. It's not really that, but it's a very crude shoestring budget program that uses artificial intelligence, and they have an avatar that interviews people. And lo and behold, they did pilot tests at Dartmouth and then on those simulated Mars missions that they're doing on the volcano out in Maui. And the darn thing worked. They found that for simple depression, simple anxiety, and simple interpersonal conflict, people were getting better using this platform. And not only that, this is the most amazing, or astounding result for me, was that when they looked at the issue of patient satisfaction, in most areas, it exceeded face-to-face therapy. Think about that for a second. Not almost as good as, not as good as, but it exceeded it. And the reason that people gave was they felt that they could be honest with it. Because we all lie to our doctors, right? How often do you floss? How much do you drink? How's your exercise? How's your diet? You get enough sleep, and we all lie because we don't want to let that person down. We like it. But they found that with the technology, with a person on the screen, people didn't worry about letting them down so that they were more honest. And in mental health treatment, honesty is everything. If you're not honest with your therapist, you're simply not going to get better. So Jay opened our eyes and he said, the technology can't solve everything, but for particular problems that we haven't been able to solve in other ways, it can add a lot. Now, the kinds of technologies that we're working with, we partner with a lot of different companies. And there's things like 7 Cups, which is a peer support app, so that a lot of people who may not need actual therapy just need somebody who can listen empathically and can give them, who has some training, and can recognize if they're in crisis. You can just bounce ideas off of them. A lot of people don't need to get into the mental health system. They can get treated that way. It's now the largest mental health provider of services in the entire state of California. Mindstrong is a company that looks basically at the exhaust that comes out of your cell phone. They look at big data. And so somebody who's been suicidal or acutely ill with depression, they can opt in to say, okay, I'll let this run on my phone. And it looks at speech patterns on your texts, on your emails, at how late you're doing it. And by having all of this data, they've been able to be very, very good at predicting when somebody's getting in trouble. And they can send an alert to your mental health provider. Hey, this guy's really slipping. You need to reach out to them. Ellipsis is a company in Palo Alto that we work with, and they do voice analytics. And they can, with 85%, just in version 1, with 85% accuracy, predict what your score on an anxiety GAD-7 scale or on a depression PHQ-9 scale would be, just by listening to 30 seconds of your voice. And it's language agnostic, because they're not listening to what you say, they're listening to how you say it. So there's incredible things that are happening now, and one of the ones that we're most excited about, and I'll spend the rest of the time talking about this, is virtual reality. Now, virtual reality has been around for 30 years. We think of it as something brand new, but it's really just been in the last few years it's become affordable, and then technology has become such that you don't get real sick having it on for more than a few minutes. But with 30 years, there's a lot of data showing that it's effective in a whole bunch of different areas. And now that it's affordable, and now that these startup companies are starting to build things, we have an opportunity to deploy tools to clinicians and in other settings that we've only dreamed of in the past. And I'll give some examples here. There's a platform by a company that we know in London called Oxford VR. And they started developing tools for people with an acute fear of heights. They developed it initially because they had several fire departments coming to them and saying, we have this problem where firefighters go up on a ladder, there's a gust of wind, and all of a sudden they get spooked. They can never go back up, and they develop this fear of heights, and they're losing their careers. In a virtual environment, they can have a virtual coach that goes in with them and gradually bring them to higher and higher places and do things where you might reach out over the ledge to save a kitten or to pick apples off of a tree or things like that. And they have found incredible data that they published in the top journal, The Lancet, in the UK, showing that many patients have been completely cured of their fear of heights in just 6 sessions, oftentimes in one day when they complete it. So they've been able to save careers. They've been able to have people that couldn't work in a tall building before now are able to do that. And so they restored function to a lot of people in their daily lives. And now they have platforms that are treating depression, social anxiety, and a number of others. Our friend Skip Rizzo at USC has done pioneering work in using VR in an immersive environment to treat PTSD for vets. And they built a virtual Iraq and virtual Afghanistan, and they bring these soldiers who are dealing with the PTSD where they haven't been able to identify their triggers and what's causing their panic attacks. And they bring them into an environment, and they can take them back into Baghdad and recreate all kinds of different scenarios. And it feels very lifelike. VR is incredibly effective at tricking your brain, which is why it works so well. And so the soldiers get into these environments, and they can put you in on foot patrol or in a convoy out in the desert, during a sandstorm, any different scenarios until they can identify, where heart rate monitors and things like that, and say, okay, now we've triggered a panic attack. We know what it is now. Because very often the things that might trigger the panic are not expected stuff. There was a vet who went through the traditional therapy, and they couldn't figure out what was causing his panic attacks. He lived in Los Angeles, and it turns out it was palm trees. They only found that out because they put him in the virtual Iraq, and whenever he saw palm trees in the Baghdad scenarios, he would have a panic attack. Once they know that the trigger is palm trees, then the therapist can do their job. They can say, okay, look, we're going to help you breathe, we're going to help you understand and be able to do self-talk. That when you see a palm tree, it doesn't mean that your convoy is about to get attacked. It doesn't mean you're unsafe. It just means that your brain is connecting dots to a really horrible thing that happened in the past. VR is being used beautifully in hospice and in palliative care, helping patients check items off their bucket list. And we're hearing things anecdotally, like people say, I can let go because I finally got to go see the loo, or I got to go swim in the Great Barrier Reef. And VR can take them to all these different environments. For addicts coming out of our recovery program, people know that very often one of the last things they start to do is to practice refusal skills. When you get in the real world, how are you going to say no? And the only, up until now, the only option for developing those skills has been role play. You pretend like you're offering me a beer, and I'll pretend like I'm offering you one. How many of you like role play? Nobody? One liar in the front. People don't like role play, and the studies show it doesn't work very well. VR gives us a whole other option for practicing skills, because they've done fMRI studies and looking at people's brains when they take them into a virtual bar or a virtual party, that they are actually triggering real cravings, and their brains light up the same ways that they were walking into a real bar, so that they can build that situational confidence and those refusal skills in an environment that is triggering real cravings, but doesn't put them at risk of losing their sobriety. This is one of my favorite ones, is Snow World, and this was, VR is very effective at treating pain, chronic and acute. Snow World was developed at the University of Washington to help kiddos who are in pediatric burn units. And anybody who has been in a burn unit knows that one of the most painful things a person can go through is when they have to exfoliate and scrub the wound site. And there's not much that they can do for these kids. You put a topical anesthetic on it and it scrubs right off. And you can't give them high doses of narcotics every time. Well, Snow World puts them in a cold weather environment. So they wear the VR headset during the procedure, and they go sledding and throw snowballs at penguins and get to make snowmen. And it's sending a message to your brain, you're cold, you're cold, you're cold. And it distracts them from the searing heat that they're feeling on the wound site. And they found in the studies that they're seeing reductions in self-reported pain north of 40%. 40% reduction. If you think about that, you're in opioid territory when you're talking about a 40% reduction in pain, just by playing games in a VR headset during the procedure. And the last area is meditation. Meditation, we know, has been around forever. We know that it's effective for all kinds of things, for dealing with depression, anxiety, and just keeping you mentally fit. But it's hard to do, and it's even harder to stick with it. If you're somebody like me that has a racing brain, I would try meditating, and 3 minutes into it, 30 seconds into it, I see a crack on the wall, and I have the ladder out, and I'm talking and fixing it. And then an hour later, I'm like, yeah, meditation, I forgot that. So in VR, it completely shuts out the world around you. I found that I can now meditate in VR. I never could before, because you really feel like you're on the beach or this beautiful mountain. We're using it with prisoners. We're using it in a number of settings like schools, companies with call centers, high-stress professions, where they can use it in between a patient, in between a class, in between a call that they're making when there's high stress. And the data is very, very good that people are able to stay in those positions longer and manage their stress a lot better. So there's one last thing I want to talk about before I wrap up. And that's gout. You're getting a lot of what the hell faces. A few years ago, I was going to visit some program officers at the foundation in Cherry Creek, and I was in the lobby of the building, and I was waiting for the elevator, and there was a maintenance guy who was standing next to me also waiting, and a guy in a suit came up, and they clearly knew each other from working in the building, and the guy in the suit said, "Hey, Mort, where have you been? I haven't seen you in a while." And the maintenance guy said, "I came down with a really bad case of gout, and I had to miss a few weeks of work." The guy in the suit said, "I had that a few years ago. It's awful. It totally relates to pain." So what medication did they put you on? He said, "Oh, I was on this." And he said, "Did they change your diet?" And he said, "Yeah, but I didn't really understand everything he was saying." The guy said, "Oh, I got a book. Let me give that to you." By this time, we're already on the elevator going up, and they're just continuing to talk. And he's so supportive. And I got to my floor, and I walked out, and I said, "That's it. That's what we need to know of." When we get to that point, when somebody can stand in the elevator and talk in front of a total stranger and say, "Hey, where have you been?" "Oh, I have bipolar disorder, and I hit a depressive episode, and I had to go and get inpatient care." "Oh, my brother has that. What medication are you on?" I have a book that might help you, and to be supportive and not care that there's another person, a stranger standing right in front of you. When we can get to that point where we're treating people that way, instead of how my Uncle Jim was treated, that's when we know that we've won. So thank you so much. You're a big part of making that happen by shining a light on this issue. And thank you for coming today. I think we do have a couple of minutes for questions if people have any.
Thank you so very much. Can you give us some applications for homeless, because it's an incredible problem, and as we know, mental health is at the core after an alcoholic and other disease abuse. Can you give us some way that we as a society can make this available to some of the homeless people?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've been really committed to at our center is to make sure that we have a trickle up, not trickle down approach. And so we started with community mental health centers, with the Medicaid population, started in prisons and the first schools in 4 districts. We haven't done much with the homeless, and it's a little trickier deploying technology there. But I think that the virtual reality stuff that we're doing, if we can get that into places like South Street, clinic, that would be fantastic. And we need to do that. But shame on us that we haven't done it yet. But it absolutely, if it works for the rest of the population, it'll work for them. Yeah.
So Matt and David, I would encourage you to connect, because David is very involved in homeless, and so maybe you can help with that. You and I talked about this before lunch. There's a major misperception that drives stigma, and that's fear of those with a mental illness. And the underlying, often unconscious assumption is that those people might hurt me.
Yep.
So it's connected to violence. Can you talk about the lack of connection between mental illness and violence towards others?
Yeah. The sad fact is that people with mental illness become very, very good scapegoats anytime there's a mass shooting or something like that, for a couple of reasons. One is that by and large, people aren't going to stand up for themselves, because that would mean outing themselves. So they're not likely to write a letter and say, hey, wait a minute, I have depression and I'm not violent. Most of the people that I know aren't. The other reason is that people can blame them under the auspices of helping and saying, oh, we need more mental health services. That's true, but when you're doing it in the context of blaming us for violent acts, thanks but no thanks. The reality is, and the data has shown this in study after study after study, is that people with serious mental illness are far, far more likely to become victims of a crime than to commit a crime. People with most mental illnesses are not violent. And if there is violence, it's by and large is targeted at oneself in the form of suicide. Yeah.
Excellent presentation, really appreciate it. Love speaking with a fellow graduate from Marquette.
Right. That was the last year of Warriors.
Were you? Yeah, I was the first year of Golden Eagles.
Okay.
There you go. So really quickly, have you been watching Next, the show Next on 9 News?
I haven't, no.
I would recommend it, especially for last night's episode. There's a reporter on Next who is struggling with mental illness, and he has come out and on the news expressed the issues that he is dealing with. And last night he specifically said, I was at the verge of killing myself and hurting myself when I received this special note from somebody.
That's awesome.
And it was amazing for what we're talking about of really having out there in the open people expressing it themselves. So it might be something that you look into.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. The reality, and one of the reasons I made the decision a few years ago to be very, very open and frank about my own experience is that we know that what changes stigma isn't billboards, it's not bus ads, it's not PSAs on TV. What changes stigma is real people who are doing well, who have overcome it, who are still struggling with it, but doing better, who can tell their own personal stories. Because I may not be able to relate, to someone like, Ted Turner, because his life is very different than me, but I could relate to this guy because we have a similar life. So it's really encouraging that we are seeing more and more people do that. There's a danger, I skipped over one of these slides though, but as we get better at dealing with stigma, we've got this tsunami coming, because the people who wouldn't ask for help before because they were afraid to come forward are now going to come forward and start asking for help. And remember that traffic jam slide? We're adding a lot more cars on I-70 when we do that. So that's why we feel such a sense of urgency with the center to develop new approaches and things that upstream and into prevention so that we don't have this crisis of, wait lists that are now 5 months becoming a year.
Hi, thank you. So I had two quick questions, I'm just quick, but how did you go from being a patient and getting help to what you're doing now? You kind of jumped right over that.
I did, yeah. Yeah, just that, I was trying to go too fast, but concurrent to my own struggles, I had been, my background's in public health, and I had been working in mental health at the university in a variety of different ways. And at the time that I was struggling, I was actually running the Depression Center, which, is a place where there's incredible care. They have some of the best providers around, but they have very long wait lists, and they don't take most insurance, and so it can be really tough to access. So what drove me, to start the center was partly my own personal experience and partly, my professional experience. Because I was the one having to make those phone calls and to tell people, great that you want to get help, and we'll see you in 5 months, and oh, by the way, save your money because you're going to need it. Those are hard calls to make.
So my other question is, I have a friend that works at the Columbus Children's Hospital, and she works with children that have been mentally and physically abused. And they're just now researching light therapy, and I was wondering if you guys do anything with that. She said that when it works amazing.
Yeah, we're not doing anything with that, but that is true that, for some people, exposing them to different spectrums and wavelengths of light can be very, very effective, especially people who have experienced trauma. It's called EMDR, and it's actually been around for a while, but the providers are getting a lot better at using it. It doesn't work at all for some people, and for the people that it does work for, it's life-changing.
Thank you for your talk.
Yeah,
It really hit home to me. My daughter has a BA in psychology and a master's in social work. And for the last 10 years, she's worked at the VA. And she has worked in psychiatric emergency services. And she and one other person gets the job. If someone comes in and they think they may be suicidal, they get them. And then they can make a diagnosis whether they're suicidal. And if they think they are, let's send them to a psychiatrist. Secondly, she said one of the favorite patients she works with are those with PTSD. If you talk about whether, I assume you do, and if they do how much the VA uses virtual reality. I could ask her, but she's not here and you are.
Yeah, so the VA is doing a reboot with the virtual reality. So Skip's platform from USC, they deployed it a number of years ago across the VA system, and they didn't do a very good job of it. They didn't do enough in training people on how to use it, helping them understand the clinical protocols, how to troubleshoot when the equipment wasn't working right. And so in very short order, it was just too complicated, and it wound up just sitting in closets at most of the VA centers and not being used. They learned from their mistakes, and so Skip has developed a whole complete training program around it now, and so they're starting to roll it out across the system again.
Colorado has such a high rate of suicide among young people, and young people love technology.
Yeah.
Are you working with them in any way?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing a lot. We see the young people who love technology as an opportunity. Because yes, believe me, there's a lot of horrible stuff out there. When I was getting ready for a different talk a few months ago, I timed myself with a stopwatch, and I went online and timed how long it took me to find information on connecting with a suicide prevention counselor. And then I timed myself on how long it took me to find a website that would show me how to tie in news. And it was almost exactly the same. And so we have that, there's two sides to this coin. And so if we can start with the fact that every kid is glued to their cell phone all the time, we can use that. Because I've seen with my son, that there were times when, through Snapchat and the maps, he was able to see that there was a party he wasn't invited to. That's devastating. But he also had a very good friend who was suicidal, had left her parents a note. She made a very serious, legitimate attempt. They were able to find her because she had left that app open on her phone, and so people knew where she was, and they saved her life as a result of it. The one I mentioned, Mindstrong, that looks at the exhaust from your phone, that they're doing a lot with adolescents and that one as well. So I think there's going to be more and more because kids love gadgets. So okay, let's deliver services on their gadgets. One more quick. Yeah, one more quick.
Matt,
Yeah.
first of all, thank you for being here. Number two, what public policy and or legislative hurdles do you butt up against that we can help advocate get changed?
No, thank you for that. There's, yeah, there are so many. I think if there's one thing, it's that we need to expand access to mental health services. We've taken, we took a big step in this direction last year with the legislature, but expanding those services to young kids. Because very often, as parents, parents can't look at our kids objectively. We look at them through this distorted lens of love, and we only see the positive. And so we can't entertain, it's unfathomable that they might be suicidal or that they might have depression. And so parents put their heads in the sand very, very often. And so we have to have a mechanism for how can those kids get help, whether it's at school-based clinics, and we have better ratios so that kids can actually access those services. And that we continue to deal with some of the consent rules that up until very recently have prevented kids from being able to access care without a parent signing a consent form. That's just my opinion. Thank you all very much.
That was absolutely great presentation. I appreciate you being here today, and you've given, I think, every one of us something to special think about, some new insight into what's going on with mental health. And thank you for being here. That's great. What we do at the Rotary Club dinner, when we have a speaker, we make a donation to End Polio Now, which is something that Rotary started back in the 1980s, as we know. So we made a donation to that on your behalf, and as a result, 100 kids will be inoculated from the polio vaccine going forward when it's matched with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So, thank you.
Actually, my first job out of grad school was with the March of Dimes, so it's dear to my heart. So thank you.
Let's see. Next week's program, we are back at, where are we? The University Club, so back downtown. Our speaker is going to be the co-founder and vice chairman, and I think perhaps the chief operating officer as well, PharmaJet. Who here has heard of PharmaJet in the room? Anybody? A few people? Yeah. It's really cool. They inject flus and other vaccines into your arm or other places, not using a needle, but they can actually shoot it right through your skin. Cool medical device technology startup company out of Golden, Colorado, and they'll be speaking to us. And PharmaJet is on the front lines of eradicating
Not flu, but
vaccines, and you can also get your flu shot at Sam's Club using their device. So it is flu as well. But when they're eradicating polio, it's not the flu shot. Yes, it's a vaccine. So anyway, it should be a great program next week. I'm not sure what I said, but thank you. And we stand up comedy as well. All right. So we're at the University Club next week, and we need to make your reservations through Lauren and your email before Monday, I believe it is, before this coming Monday. And for you downtowners, folks that are used to being downtown walking to the meeting, thank you very much for the extra effort that you made today to come out here and try out the Denver Country Club. Let's finish up with our four-way test. Go ahead and stand up. Of the things we think, say, or do,
is the truth, is fair to all concerned. Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
We're adjourned.